But let's return now and spend some time looking at the topic of India's defense, because if Air India was buying aircraft at the Aero show, at Aero 2023, there was a lot of talk also about the possibility of India making aircraft and selling them in other parts of the world. A lot of focus on defense, and in particular India's defense manufacturing capabilities. Air India could be importing billions and billions of dollars in Airbus and Boeing jets. But the big question that came up at the Aero show was, can companies like HAL sell billions of dollars of aircraft, sell Tejas, sell the LCH, sell Dhruvas, sell other planes? Can countries like Argentina become the first to buy a made-in-India fighter or a made-in-India helicopter? And we're going to take a look at that in some detail. But we should remember that at the Aero show, the light combat aircraft Tejas was a key attraction, a video of which landing on INS Vikrant had made headlines just a couple of weeks back. You'll recall from the show when that plane landed on India's first indigenous aircraft carrier. Those images did go all around the world. But it's not just the Tejas. A lot of attention at the Aero show was also on HAL's helicopters, which are now being widely considered among the best in class. Their capability, especially at high altitudes, is not something that can be matched by any other helicopter really anywhere in the world. Now India has the fourth largest air force in the world, but the fleet, which a lot of it is actually Russian or Soviet era, in the need of modernization, needs to expand, and India is scouting for more planes, billions of dollars worth of fighter jets. It could take India to build out the Tejases and the twin-engine deck fighters and others. India needs more planes. So all of these companies are here to say, we potentially have a solution for you. The Boeing is saying, use the F-18. Why don't you use the F-18 on your flagship Vikrants or Vikramaadityas to ward off China's influence in the Indian Ocean? Rafale is saying, you've already got our jets. Why don't you buy more of our jets and use them? Have that 114 jet order, buy some Rafales from us, and hey, you can put them on that aircraft carrier as well. Well, to understand everything that's happening, not just at Aero India, but the broader strategy, what is it that the Indian Air Force is going to be doing now? The need to go up to 42 squadrons, the need to have a proper air doctrine, which is something which is being worked upon. Also, the extent to which India can really become Atmanirbhar. It's a great pleasure to welcome onto the India story Air Marshal retired Diptendu Choudhury, also joining us, Air Vice Marshal retired Manmohan Bahadur. Thank you both so much for joining us. Air Marshal Choudhury, if I could just start with you. First of all, we are starting to see a lot of focus now coming back to the Navy and to the Air Force. How do you build these two up? And how do you have your own production? How do you become Atmanirbhar? How do you become self-reliant? Whether it's the Tejas or the helicopters, the LCH and others that are now being considered. How do you see this overall direction and the strategy?
Thank you, Vikram, at the outset to have me on your show. And the opening question is actually very, historically, there's a lot of background to it that India has ever since independence. I mean, there has been a goal and an ambition to become self-reliant, and that has been underpinning in our larger national outlook. But given our historical past, post-independence, the trauma we went through, it takes time to build up indigenous capacity. And today, if anything, in the post-COVID world, which we are all experiencing now, there has been a definite shift and focus towards national security and national interests first in the world over. And this has sort of been underpinned by the the huge geopolitical churn, because Asia is today a center of is actually your crucible of the future economic growth and power play. And given India's growth trajectory, I think it's never been more important to underscore the need for self-reliance and not have critical dependencies on other nations. And that's, I think, really a long-term future strategy which will need to be sort of encouraged along the way. So the Atmanirbharta is very important, I think.
All right, now, Air Marshal Bahadur, India's perhaps always wanted to be self-reliant in some of these areas. India may have always wanted to make its own planes, but I think the capability wasn't always there. And that was the reason why India had no option or no choice but to, go and get those Sukhois or the MiG-29 for the carriers, things like that, because whatever was being produced here was essentially just not good enough. Now, with the Tejas, with the new helicopters, has India reached the position where the Air Force can actually look at these planes and say, hey, these are good enough, they're very good aircraft, we are happy with them, we can live with them, and we would like to continue to develop these?
Thank you, Vikram, for getting me on the program. You see, when we're talking of indigenous production, we must remember two things. One, any armed force wants to be modern, contemporary as of today. But making a domestic aircraft industry or an armament industry takes decades. So there is a mismatch here. So while we talk of Atmanirbharta, when we talk of indigenization, we must remember that despite whatever you want, there is a certain finite time which will be required to get your factories going, to get your R&D going. Very importantly, and we tend to forget, skilled manpower available to man those manufacturing and R&D setups. So there is to be a good match between indigenization and modernization. So what I feel is that we started well. If you remember, the Marut started in the 60s. Okay, we were really progressing. We didn't have an engine. Things slowed down after that. There were economic reasons too, and geopolitical reasons too. But now we're catching up. It will still take some time, and the Air Force, as the other two services, will have to have a good mix between local products and imported products, so that our cutting strength, our edge doesn't reduce. At the same time, we develop local industry and man ourselves with that. Nothing pleases more Air Force pilot or Army or a naval guy to man and fly an Indian machine.
Right, so 2 points that you're really making out there. Let's discuss both of them. One is the technology actually good enough and are the aircraft themselves good enough? And the second is, how much time will it take to get to production at the level that actually meets the requirement of the Air Force? And they're not exactly the same things. They have to be kept in mind separately. Air Marshal Choudhury, on both of those questions, first of all, the quality of what is now being produced, is that good enough? Tejas Mark 1 or the helicopters, are they great?
Certainly, Vikram, because today the Tejas is a sort of it's a trajectory of a growth trajectory which has brought us to where we are in terms of capability. And there are certain areas like engines have always been a challenge for India, and it takes time to build indigenous capabilities. It takes a long time to build indigenous capability. I think the quality of for the platforms which are coming out, and especially the Tejas, the way it has matured the program and what the future contours are for its future development, I think we have a very sound and a robust beginning. I mean, beginnings were always there, but I think the robustness of the industry has definitely matured, and more so with the amount of push that has been given. And what is interesting is the growing interest on these platforms, especially in the regional air forces and internationally, is an indication of the maturity of India's quality, what we produce. And this is not just in aircraft. We have a fairly good and a robust industry as far as missiles are concerned. If you remember the old IGMDP program and the missiles India has produced along the way, it's a very fairly robust program. And so has been our air defense radars. So there are certain niche areas where I think the quality of the Indian production has matured over the years to enough to become a possible global competitor. And it'll take time, like Air Marshal Bahadur very rightly said, that these things take time. But the challenge in terms of numbers, what you brought out, is I think that we have to probably, this whole business of balancing capability with capacity. And that is where the challenge lies.
Right. How you build out that capacity gap is, I guess, something which the international market is also considering. I was talking right now about the prospect of perhaps exports being done to other countries. But the question is also going to be, what level can you manufacture these planes of? Because if India needs 114 fighter aircraft in the very near future, how does that happen? India needs to build something for the aircraft carriers. You can't wait until the capacity builds out and until it is ready. But Air Vice Marshal Bahadur, if I could throw those questions to you on the quality of what is available, how do you think it is all stacking up? And also the quality of what is on the horizon. For example, will the AMCA be okay? When will it be ready? The twin-engine, tech-based, deck-based fighter, when do you think that will actually be ready to be considered a serious alternative to imports?
Let's split this into two things. Let me talk helicopters first. I personally feel that the rotary wing R&D and manufacturing of HAL has reached a stage where we can stand on our feet and say, listen, we want to export.
Okay, so you're saying in that area, we are already at a level where it's the best in the world. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You see, when you're talking of the ALH, the Dhruv, where do you get an aircraft which can land at 19,000 feet with 150 kgs of load? When you got Prachand, the LCH, landing at 15,000 feet with armament and able to deliver armament at those altitudes. So nowhere in the world such a capability exists in an airborne machine. So the point at issue is, while this is true, there's much more than that. There's much more than demonstration, which is getting your manufacturing lines up, getting your documentation up, getting your training, the jigs, etc., to meet an international order. We didn't go well the ALH way, if you recall it, the Ecuador saga which was there. Hopefully we have learned from that. So I personally feel if there is a need for prioritization, for privatization, the first element that must be privatized so that it makes profit and puts us on the map is the helicopter division of HAL. We got the LCH, we got the ALH Dhruv, we have the advanced light, the LUH coming up, IMRH, the Indian multi-role helicopter, still on the drawing boards, but to come up. That is one aspect that can come. So has the quality improved? Yes, I think we used to live quite precariously when the ALH Dhruv entered service. Things have improved drastically now. There are no two ways about it. LCH has just entered service, so we won't have any idea yet on its serviceability. The Tejas, as I read in the press, has been good now.
Vikram Bahadur, your sense of what do you think is going to happen in the medium or the short term? Right now, for example, India probably needs 114 aircraft, may end up being another government-to-government contract. People are saying perhaps it makes more sense to get more Rafales so that, it's easier to have maintaining just one or two different types of aircraft. You don't have too many aircrafts. Is that the direction you see us moving in, or do you think a completely different aircraft should be considered?
There is no doubt about it that quantity has its own quality. You have to have a minimum amount of mass. That has to happen. And hence, aircraft have to be phased out, as the time goes on. So we have to find the numbers from somewhere. So number one, the Air Force, the Indian Air Force, is heavily dependent on HAL. The previous chief and the present chief have put all our eggs in HAL's basket, saying we require this 123 Tejas on time, and thereafter we require another 5 squadrons, or was it 6, or is it 6 squadrons of Tejas Mark II. So these are numbers that are part of the building up capability and preventing the decline in numbers. HAL cannot afford to work the way its culture was earlier. It has to produce this aircraft in time and on quality.
All right, that's a really fascinating perspective to end this on. I think you've given us a really interesting account of what the various pieces at play are as India continues to build its air strength. And we'll try and do exactly the same with Army strength and Navy strength in the weeks and months going forward. Thank you both so much for joining us.